What does freedom mean to you? Does it mean the freedom to choose? The freedom to have a family and raise your kids according to your own values? What about living a wild, adventurous life, experimenting with music, relationships, or art? What does freedom really mean? What if freedom meant something that only a few Americans still understood? What if it meant that your choices and your values were set by you, rather than by some politician in a far-off capital? Some people think we're only free to choose to live exactly how they live, by their moral code, or their narrow worldviews. But if liberty means anything, it means that you, and you alone, have the power to exercise your rights to which the laws of nature and nature's God granted you. It's time to put these principles back into action. It's time to restore the American dream, activate in our communities, and take our country back. It's time to wake up, America. Good morning, it's 7:07. Happy Hump Day. This is Wednesday on the Wake Up America show. You're listening to Austin Peterson. Thanks so much for tuning in. Well, he did it. The son of a bitch did it. Donald Trump running for president of the United States again in 2024. It's like Groundhog Day. We're basically going to keep doing this forever and ever until he becomes president again. Maybe that's just the argument. If you don't like Trump, just let him have his last 4 years, last term, and then he'll go away. But if you like Donald Trump, you probably woke up excited this morning and ready to start the campaign. We'd love to hear from you what you think about what Donald Trump announced last night. Send us a text at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. You can send the show a text at that number, and we'd love to hear from you. Of course, we are still doing our YouTube Blitz, so I'd love it if you wouldn't mind joining us over on YouTube this morning. We're getting so close to monetization. We are like right on the edge. 3,824 public watch hours. We've got to get to 4,000 watch hours. Do me a favor, watch us over on YouTube today. I'd be super grateful. And of course, like and subscribe and hit that bell notification icon. All right, so we'll talk about the pros and cons of Donald Trump running for president of the United States. There are some pros to all the haters out there. We will discuss those, and there's some pretty big pros. We'll talk about that this morning at the top of the show. And after that, Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, announced that they will now facilitate euthanasia in his country for the mentally ill. I could make some jokes about it, but I think I won't because it's such a serious subject and it's something that I find deeply disturbing. We'll talk about that at 7:18, and at 7:35 this morning, Donald Trump's former chief economist will be joining me. Vance Ginn, he was the head economist at the Office of Management and Budget at the White House during the Trump administration. You know, it's probably a good idea to ask Vance what he thinks about that. Jeff Bezos also signaled that families should not spend money on large ticket items. They should think twice about it, like refrigerators and TVs and things like that. And, you know, when a man who owns a company that's job it is to sell you stuff tells you maybe it's a good time to think about not buying things, I think our economy's in trouble. We're going to talk to Vance Ginn about that at 7:35. At 8 o'clock this morning, what does Judge Napolitano think of the Donald Trump announcement last night? We'll talk to him this morning at 8 o'clock about that. And I want to ask him his thoughts on the missile that hit and killed 2 Polish farmers. World War III was trending yesterday on Twitter. Will we actually come to a conflict that would involve NATO? Don't know. We'll find out. We'll talk to Judge Napolitano about that at 8 o'clock. And then at 8:30 this morning, I spoke to Tony Lavasco yesterday. I'll give you a nice little replay and discussion of the midterms with Donald. And we'll talk to him about all that good stuff. Again, you can text the show 573-319-1586. We'd love to hear from you this morning. All right, let's head over to our shop scene. I'd love it if you wouldn't mind hitting us up over at AP for Liberty Shop. Don't forget, too, that you're getting a 10% discount this week for the Cantina crew. 10% off if you use the code Cantina. We would love it if you would head over there, Stephanie and I, so we can get your packages up and out there so that it'll make it there before Christmas time. We've got the big guy over on YouTube, as well as Rare Camellia, Chris Morrill joining us, Doug H., and Matt Unruly. Thank you so much for joining us. And yes, I do feel a little spiffy this morning. I appreciate you tuning in live to the show today. The big guy says, we've been killing inconvenient people for 6 decades. What the hell is the context of that? I have no idea. All right, so let's just hit the news. Donald Trump announces for President of the United States, and the left just melted down predictably. The National Review and many other Never Trump conservatives came out with hit pieces describing why he should not be President of the United States. Let's just hear it from the man's mouth himself, though.
America great and glorious again. I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
In order to make America great and glorious again, he is announcing his campaign for President of the United States. It was a fairly muted speech. I had to turn it off after about 40 minutes of it because it kept going on pretty long, and I thought it was fairly low energy, although I thought it was, a good campaign speech and, seemed to cover all the bases, made a good case for why he should have been President of the United States, talked about what he did for the United States in terms of energy independence, talked about how the United States was respected around the world, how we had the strongest economy that the United States had ever seen. And those are all definitely points in the pros column, but there are points in the negative column as well. So I'd actually like to hear from you, pro or con. And if you'd like me to read your message on air, best way to do that, again, is to text it to me so that I can see it. A lot of times the stream goes by a little bit too fast, so I can't read your comments on the live stream. If you want to have your pro or con comment read on the air, you can send us in a text 573-319-1586. You can also call the show at that number, but I highly recommend, if you're going to do that, to wait until the commercial break, then call the show. That way I can get you into the program and get you on there. That's another good reason why I have commercials, so that I can get my guests onto the program. So if you'd be so kind, if you want to call in, make sure you do that during the commercial break. But let's go ahead and get started with the big topic. When Donald Trump announced last night, I sat down and asked myself, okay, well, this is happening. So there's no stopping it. Let's ask ourselves, what are really the pros and cons? First, let's talk about the pros. Donald Trump did the country a huge favor by killing off the Clinton dynasty in 2016. We can all say thank you, I think, to Donald Trump. Anybody who believes in freedom, anybody who is not a fan of the establishment, who didn't want to see a Bush Clinton dynasty, um, we have Donald Trump to thank for that. And I certainly think that he deserves a big debt of gratitude for that. Certainly a big applause to Donald Trump for that. Also, I think in even bigger applause, Donald Trump nominated and got confirmed 3 constitutionalist judges. Yeah, I think that, again, Donald Trump deserves a big debt of gratitude for getting. I think Neil Gorsuch himself alone is a strong argument for electing Donald Trump. I mean, if he's basically the most libertarian Supreme Court justice possibly in American history. It's a big statement. So if you're like me and you believe in freedom and you believe in liberty, then I think that we owe Donald Trump, again, just for Gorsuch. Yeah. Just for Justice Gorsuch, we owe Donald Trump a major debt of gratitude. So you can say thank you, Donald Trump. Now, I know some of you last night were like this.
No, God!
I know.
No, God, please, no!
And
no!
Yes, I know.
No!
Okay,
No!
calm down, please. Yes, we will get to the cons here in just a moment, but I'm still on the pros column, and I think that there are plenty of pros for us to go through. So let's continue this. Let's see. Reform taxes. Yes, he did more tax reform than Ronald Reagan did. That's a huge win. God, wouldn't you love to see some tax reform again, right? Other than this dismal, dark, and dreary era of let's go, Brandon, the tax reform that Donald Trump did gave us a really nice tax cut. And that's the kind of reform that we want to see. The people like myself who believe in freedom, that's a huge pro in the pro column. Another big one for Donald Trump, and again, this is huge. This is what really matters. The substance here, push deregulation. Yes. Yes, he was a big believer in deregulation. I remember seeing Vice President Mike Pence speaking in 2018 when he came to Missouri to campaign for Josh Hawley, and Vice President Pence was bragging about the administration cutting regulations. For every new regulation that came in, they cut one, and we could sit down and quantify that. But the Trump administration was very much against regulations, and I think we as liberty lovers give him a big cheer for that one. He pushed for control of the border. Now, while liberty lovers like ourselves, we may not be big fans of Trumpers and their restrictionist policies on immigration, but you have to admit that just from President Trump when he won office in 2016, just the rhetoric that we were going to control our border was enough to turn away many of these migrants. We started to see a reduction in the amount of illegal immigrants coming into the United States. And I think that reducing the number of illegal immigrants is a net positive in my opinion. Now, do I want to see more free market libertarian solutions to immigration? Yes, I absolutely do. But do I think that we should have a semblance of control over our southern border for national security purposes? Yes, I absolutely do. And I think that Donald Trump deserves a big part of credit for that. Do I think we need a gigantic border wall? Probably not. Which makes me, I guess, a never Trumper, and America, the Trump people who are listening to that are like, how dare you? How dare you not be for the wall? Well, I think there are better ways to solve these problems. So, anyways, what do you think? Send me a text at 573-319-1586. Elizabeth Fanning Press did just that. She says Trump will shake it up. Not at all bad. He'll finish off McConnell and McCarthy. Highly doubt that. I'm skeptical. She says, I'm okay with it. Just fight the Dems, not the other Repubs at this point, is my advice. And she says she's going to call in one of these days. Speaking of not fighting the Repubs, you know who is doing a good job of that? Look at the way that listen to the way that Ron DeSantis handled the attacks made upon him by former President Donald Trump. Take a listen to this.
We would like to know what you think about Trump's big announcement and some of the less than flattering comments he has made about you.
Well, one of the things I've learned in this job is when you're leading, when you're getting things done, you take incoming fire. That's just the nature of it. I roll out of bed in the morning. I've got corporate media outlets that have a spasm, just the fact that I'm getting up in the morning, and it's constantly attacking. And this is just what's happened. I don't think any governor got attacked more, particularly by corporate media, than me over my 4-year
Nice
term.
deflection.
And yet, I think what you learn is all that's just noise. And really what matters is, are you leading? Are you getting in front of issues? Are you delivering results for people? And are you standing up for folks? And if you do that, then none of that stuff matters. And that's what we've done. We focused on results and leadership. And, at the end of the day, I would just tell people to go check out the scoreboard from last Tuesday night. The fact of the matter is, the fact of the matter is, it was the greatest Republican victory in the history of the state of Florida.
Wow, greatest Republican victory in the history of the state of Florida. I think that's the way to handle it. And Liz Fanning Press, I got to say, if you're looking for somebody to not attack Republicans, Donald Trump's probably not your guy. You're probably looking a little bit more for a Ron DeSantis type. Now, in the pros column, I think another major thing, significantly degraded ISIS in Syria and Iraq. He cinched normalization deals between Israel and the Gulf states. A lot of GOP voters, including myself, appreciate his combativeness against his enemies, and a lot of these progressives engaged in excesses in pursuit of him, which, I think that it laid bare the threat of liberal Democrats, even though the voters didn't see that in the midterms last week, which is another big problem, and probably one of the cons column, which is why we need to
shooting things. But whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today. Fire.
Your printing company stinks. They charge you too much money and they don't love America enough. We've got the solution. Patriot Printing USA. Whether you're running for office, saving souls, or just need business cards that will get you the new job you've been looking for, Patriot Printing USA has got you covered with the best prices around. Palm cards, brochures, bumper stickers, door hangers, you name it, we've got it. PatriotPrintingUSA.com. That's PatriotPrintingUSA.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. It's 7:25. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. Let's rise in freedom. All right, it's the pros and cons we've been talking about here of Donald Trump running for president of the United States. Good morning, Sarah Palacios, Rare Camellia, Matt Unruly, Chris Morrill. Nice to see you all today. Camellia says that no one's owed anything, not even Trump. We do what is best for the country now. I hope Republicans are ready to lose big if they go with this guy. It cut off right before I could finish it because of Burt Crash down there. At least Trump wasn't active. What does that mean? I don't know. If you want me to read your comments, send us a text, 573-319-1586. Elizabeth Fanning Press wants me to ask Vance Ginn, who's joining us in a few minutes, would Zuckerberg dare to ban a U.S. presidential candidate? It's going to be good. Ask Vance that. Yeah, Vance Ginn. Well, won't that be a good one? One listener, our friend from the 309, says, I love what Trump accomplished during his presidency from a policy standpoint and judge appointments. The media's dishonest attacks on him were also a large part of me being red-pilled about 3 years ago. But I think DeSantis has all the positive qualities of Trump and none of the negatives. I also worry that Trump challenging DeSantis could be a big distraction that costs us the 2024 election. Remember, infighting in the Republican Party between Taft and Roosevelt is what led to Woodrow Wilson being elected, who arguably is the worst president the country's ever had from a libertarian's point of view. He can be tied to so many catastrophic events that it can still be felt not just by our country, but by the world. Well, I see you are an educated man or woman, whoever's texting me from the 309 number. Where is 309? Let's see. 309 area code is Illinois. Oh, well, thank you, Illinoisan, for texting in this morning at 573-319-1586. All right, well, let's have our discussion. We've got a few minutes left in the segment before we get Vance Ginn on the show. Let's get some. Justin Amash just tweeted this video of Donald Trump's speech last night. I guess I missed this one because I started to fall asleep after about half an hour. But this was from Donald Trump's speech where, and I would definitely put this in the con category in terms of why it would not be good to reelect him. Take a listen.
Drug dealer, during his or her life on average, will kill 500 people with the drugs they sell, not to mention the destruction of families. But we're going to be asking everyone who sells drugs, gets caught selling drugs, to receive the death penalty for their heinous acts, because drug dealer...
Okay. Pause there. All right, so obviously libertarians being against the war on drugs would find this distasteful. But, you know, if I wanted to point out a little bit of irony, Donald Trump was the biggest pusher of the vaccine that there was, Operation Warp Speed. So, you know, I doubt that many of his biggest supporters would see the hypocrisy here, but many of his biggest supporters, like Candace Owens and others, were deeply upset at Donald Trump for pushing the vaccine. And they basically say that anybody who pushes for this vaccine is a killer because it's sort of like the pro-vaxxers and the pro-lockdown people who were like, you're a grandma killer if you don't believe in lockdowns. Well, now the anti-vaxxers are like, well, you're a baby killer because if you advocate for the vaccine, then, you know, you're the reason why people are getting myocarditis. So then wouldn't Donald Trump be one of the biggest drug pushers that there is? You know, again, I'm asking people who are, you know, incapable of looking outside of their bubble to think critically about these things. So I know I'm asking too much of people to make that consideration, but I do think that it is a little bit of, you know, if you're listening to the Wake Up America show, you're probably a little bit more clued in to what's going on there. So I wonder if you see that kind of irony or hypocrisy as well. You can send me a text at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. We love to hear from our listeners this morning. And he was lied to, AP, says Denise A. Price Welsh. Well, see, that's the problem is if he was lied to, well, then he wasn't smart enough to realize that he was lied to. And that's another con for him. So you have to argue that either he was malicious or that he was stupid. And you're arguing that he's stupid. So I don't think that's not quite the strong defense that you really want there. Chris Morrill says, I wouldn't even agree that Trump was that good on policy. Well, I disagree with you there, Chris. I think that, you know, overall that Trump was very good on policy. Josiah Town says that he supports the death penalty. My problem, of course, with the death penalty is, you know, I have a good friend who lives here in Jefferson City who was convicted of murdering his wife. And then they found out later that it was this serial killer in the state of California who actually did it. And he could have been put on death row and he could have been killed. The problem with the death penalty is you have to accept morally that you will kill innocent people in order to go after the guilty. And I find that to be highly immoral. Josiah Town says that I don't think he was lied to. He was backed into a corner. Well, again, the problem with that is, Josiah, then you're saying he was a coward. So again, he is not perfect. No one was in his shoes. That's correct, Denise. But isn't DeSantis better? I think he definitely is. It's the most important election ever again, says Robbie Thurman. Well, Robbie, you're absolutely correct. Let's talk to our friend Vance Ginn about all of this. He was Donald Trump's top economist in the Office of Management of Budget. We'll talk to him about that when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here. And we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Austin's wife. I want to thank you all for watching the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. This show has been a huge venture for our family, so we would love it if you could join us.
I believe in liberty, and I believe in Austin's ability to spread the ideas of liberty. Do you?
I want to ask you today to join Peterson's Patriots with a pledge of $17.76 a month. Help us to stay cancel-proof so we can spread the message of limited government across the country. I joined Peterson's Patriots myself, just in a little different way. Visit wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and make your pledge today.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
Speaker Pelosi's husband, Paul, made a big investment in chips just before Congress votes on a bill that would give $52 billion in subsidies and tax credits to the chip industry.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom at 7:35. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. All right, well, you know my next guest. I've had him on quite a bit since the Wake Up America show launched, and I thought I'd have him on today to talk about the state of the economy, but then I realized, oh wait, this is Donald Trump's former chief economist for the Office of Management and Budget in the White House. And yes, he's a senior fellow at Young Americans for Liberty, but we will talk about the economy today, but I think we probably have something bigger that we have to ask him, just as a matter of course. He's Vance Ginn, and he's joining us now. Good morning, Vance. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, good morning, Austin. Yeah, just a little bit of news last night, huh?
Yeah, just a little bit of news there. So I guess, what was your reaction to it, Vance?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot of good that President Trump can provide on the policy side. When you look at the Trump tax cuts, you look at the deregulation, historic amount of deregulation that took place, the corporate tax cut from 35% down to 21%, a lot of the criminal justice reform that took place. There was a lot of good policies that were part of that whole approach. I'm hopeful that some of those policies will also bleed through some of the other tweets and other things that go on where it kind of gets Trump in trouble sometimes. And so it's an interesting way to bring both of those together, the Trumpian attitude versus the Trumpian policies. And sometimes it pushes people away because of the attitude versus the really sound, I think, in many ways, fiscal policies that were in place. We also didn't get into any new wars, which is important, stay out of a lot of that stuff. And, I think what would have happened with Russia and Ukraine if Trump would have been president, or some of these other things that were happening. But we've also got to look at government spending, all those things. And so, look, at the end of the day, we need people to have a good discussion about what the future of America is going to be. And one of the things that Trump does bring is people together from, and say, look, we've got to have a better America, make America great again. MAGA, this sort of mantra there has a good ring to it that resonates with a lot of people who really feel like America is heading on a wrong track. And so I think others should join in. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, down there. I've heard Greg Abbott here in Texas, where I'm at. Others will probably join the fold. And so I guess this is the start of all that.
If you're just tuning in, I'm speaking to Vance Ginn. He is a former top economist in the White House during the Trump administration. He worked in the Office of Management and Budget. Now, Vance, you and I, we pretty much probably agree when it comes to economics. You come on the show, you talk about ending the Federal Reserve. We probably, are both big fans of Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises, et cetera, et cetera. So you and I would say, are probably of pretty like mind. So my question to you is, how open was Donald Trump to our Austrian economic ideas in however many interactions you may have had to him? How willing was he to listen to the ideas that you espoused?
Yeah, it's a great question, Austin. And I think, and I agree. Friedrich Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, those guys, Milton Friedman, those are my favorite economists. I know Milton Friedman is not quite Austrian, but the kind of a mixture of those is really where my mindset is as a free market economist, which is what I usually consider myself, because I don't really want to get into one school. I think there's a lot of good schools that are out there. And I, of course, espoused that while I was there at the White House and bringing up good fiscal rules, trying to bring in, James Buchanan is another good economist of public choice economics, of bringing in constitutional rules that set the boundaries for what government should be within. And that fits in, I think, with the Austrian school and everything else and ending the Fed. And I think in many ways, President Trump looked at the Fed and say, look, the Fed's doing too much, doing too little. Maybe he wanted to play too much of a role in what the Fed was doing. But I think at the end of the day, he would like to end the Fed as well. It may not have came out and said it. But I also think, though, that there maybe wasn't as much.
That's a big deal, Vance. You got to understand, people like myself sitting back here and wondering, pros and cons. That is a huge pro. If you truly believe that, that would definitely tip me more in his column.
I think that's the case because, look how aggressive he was with the Fed, saying, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And a lot of people will push back and say, well, look, the Fed should be independent, which is a bunch of BS. the Fed isn't independent. I mean, there's a lot of politicking that's going on between them. And at the end of the day, like whenever I was in grad school and learning economics, they talk a lot about how the Fed should be independent and here's what they can do. But the Fed shouldn't be manipulating the economy the way that they are, putting all this money into the economy, manipulating interest rates, which changes all the orders of production, the good Austrian schools of order of production that's out there. And so it has a huge effect. Now, the other side of that, though, is that I think something I would like to see more out of Trump is about cutting government spending. He wasn't as vocal within that term about government spending the way that I would have liked for him to be. And a lot of the others internal to the White House were trying to push him more in that direction. He was much more about the tax cuts, right, versus restraining government spending. It sells better at the end of the day. I mean, there's a lot of populism that goes on of handing out tax cuts, handing out government spending. And so it's tough to bring that in. But I'm hopeful that maybe that could be the next wave. I think we're seeing more of that, Austin, is that people are saying, look, we're spending too much. Government's too big. We've got to start covering government spending. Because if we do that, if we leave less debt on the table for the Federal Reserve to manipulate and put more money in the economy, that will also reduce the role that the Federal Reserve has in the overall economy.
Just tuning in, I'm speaking to Vance Ginn. He worked for Donald Trump in the White House as a chief economist at the Office of Management Budget. He's also a senior fellow at Young Americans for Liberty, which means if you're a big liberty lover, then Vance Ginn is somebody that you should definitely be listening to. Vance, I'd like to ask you a little bit about the state of the economy now. I'd like to transition because, obviously Donald Trump did a lot of spending. Our economy has, and Joe Biden doubled down on that. And I think our economy has suffered and struggled under that inflation. Even Jeff Bezos from Amazon, whose job it is to sell things to people, said that people might want to cut back on any kind of big purchases and hedge themselves against risk. I mean, that's a pretty ominous warning when a billionaire whose job it is to sell us things is saying you might not want to buy things, Vance.
It is. Whenever I first read that article, the first thing I thought about, or actually just read the headline, was like, look, here's another sign of a recession coming. A lot of people have tried to avoid using the word recession over this year. You and I have talked about it, Austin. I think we're in a recession. I think it's continuing to go on. I think it started in about March of this year. And that first quarter, second quarter, we're declining real economic output, meaning declining real GDP. The third quarter showed positive number of 2.6% growth. But if you exclude net exports and just look at the domestic economy, it was negative 0.1%. Right. And if you look, if inflation had been as high as it was the last three quarters, because it went down to 4% because oil and gas prices came down. Right. So that brought down the headline number. If it had been the same rate, it would have also been negative. So I think we've really seen 3 declining quarters of real economic output in the domestic economy. And that's going to continue because of these bad policies that have been put in place. And you're right. It started under Trump when the CARES Act was put in place. But that was kind of a different situation in the sense of the pandemic and the shutdowns. And I think it was too large and there was too many checks sent out to everyone. It should have been more targeted sort of approach. But then when Biden came in and passed the American Rescue Plan Act, another $2 trillion, whenever states were already starting to reopen and get things going again, that just sent the inflationary pressures through the roof. And then the Fed printed $5 trillion. They added their balance sheet, $5 trillion. That was going to lead to more inflation. And so it's never going to be transitory. It was always going to be, persistent inflation. And that's what we've seen. And so it's only going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. And hopefully it looks like, so the House, I guess, is going to Republicans now, right? And they've got 218 seats right at it. Hopefully we can have some gridlock. Gridlock is often good in Congress from getting stuff passed that's bad. And I would like to see more pro-growth policies, but that's unlikely to happen. So at least let's stop the nonsense right now because it's really getting out of control, and it has been for a while.
Just tuning in, I'm speaking to Vance Ginn. We're discussing the state of the economy in light of Donald Trump's announcement last night. So, Joe Biden probably feels pretty energized by the midterm results, which weren't the red wave that we were hoping and expecting, Vance. So, I mean, I guess the expectation here is that Joe Biden's going to continue. I mean, he basically said he's going to continue to do what he has been doing, which is probably means more pain and suffering for the next 2 years.
Unfortunately, Austin, I think that's right. I mean, I think ultimately what I think we'll see is that the House is going to come in and pass some good reforms, more energy exploration, getting, the federal government off the neck of oil and gas companies like they've been over the last couple of years. I think they'll pass extending the Trump tax cuts They'll probably pass some spending reforms, which will be important. The problem is the Senate, which we don't know what that's going to look like just yet. We still got the Herschel Walker over in Georgia race going on there. But let's say they don't pass these things, it's just going to die. Or even if they could pass it, I think Biden would veto a lot of it, because really what we're going to see is the Biden show. Biden show is going to be more executive orders, one regulation after another to get their green energy agenda passed, regulate baking every way that they can, put the energy and social governance, ESG sort of situation in place, and wreck the economy more. Oil and gas, whether you like fossil fuels or not, are the lifeblood of the economy. It's what keeps everything going all around us is oil in our clothes and everything else. And if you choke that out of the economy, you're choking the overall economic growth that's been so prosperous for decades, centuries now, from having that in place. And so I think it's going to be a tough situation over the next couple of years, hopefully leading up to a more prosperous after 2024 election, that hopefully will have some more liberty-minded candidates. And one thing I should say, Austin, is that, Young Americans for Liberty, it's really about finding state legislators that are liberty-minded across the country. And the number of them doubled from this election, more than 300 now across the country. And the bills that have been passed by liberty-minded folks now represent about 90 million people across the country. And so we can head in a good direction if we have a liberty-minded free market approach moving forward. And hopefully we didn't get the huge red wave. Maybe it wasn't a tidal wave, but there's some ripples that are looking across the nation more red than they did before.
Vance Ginn, he is a senior fellow at Young Americans for Liberty. He's also a former top economist under the Trump White House. Rare Camellia over on the live stream says that the Biden administration has already felt like an eternity. I think that's at least one thing that we can all agree on this morning. Vance, thank you very much for joining us. I'll look forward to having you on my afternoon program today in St. Louis on the Austin Peterson Show. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Austin. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. What did you think of Vance Ginn? Send us a text, 573-319-1586. And like I said, Vance is going to join me on the afternoon program today. Have you been watching or listening to the Austin Peterson Show on the Real Talk Radio Network at 2 p.m.? Camellia was on the show yesterday, and then she even forgot. And then she was like, oh my God, I forgot. You need to set an alarm on your phone. Yeah, Camellia, come on. Set an alarm on your phone, 2 p.m., everybody. The Real Talk Radio Network, and then you open up the app and chat with us in real time. It's going to be great. We don't want to miss that. All right, so let's continue our discussion of the pros and cons of Donald Trump 2024. That was a great interview. We've got Judge Napolitano's take. He's going to give us a hardcore one. I don't know what he's going to say at 8 a.m. Might be spicy. All that and more on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
As a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit SaluteHeroes.org to learn more.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun. Thank you, Ben.
Do facts no longer matter? Are lies to be encouraged instead of punished? This is not our inheritance. If truth no longer matters, we will not remain free for long. This is our generation's challenge, to defend our founders' hope that we the people could self-govern if we defend our right to get the facts. And right now, we're building the only defense of free people have, the facts, on every politician, every position they held, every statement they've made, every vote they've made, and any cash they've taken. It's the real history on those now pandering for your vote. There are hundreds of young people building our defense right now, and they need your help. We all have our passions, but as our ancestors knew, when events become so foul they threaten us all, we must stand and defend each other. Please, have our backs. Join us at votesmart.org.
What would happen if I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors? What would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be. There is no typical firefighter.
We wish you a freedom Christmas. We wish you a freedom Christmas. We wish you a freedom Christmas and a liberty New Year. Socialists and commies may try to convince you that the holiday's all about free stuff. But let's be honest, we all know whose wallet Santa's gifts are coming out of. There ain't no such thing as a free stocking. Santa is the only guy with a big white beard promising free stuff that we want anything to do with this holiday. And if you don't believe, you don't receive. It's a capitalist, consumerist holiday, and it's time for a Santa-sized stimulus. Get your free market merch at the AP for Liberty shop today and stuff your socialist sisters' stockings full of capitalist cheer. Ho, 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 ho!
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. It's 7:53, and you're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Judge Napolitano will be joining us here this morning at 8 o'clock. We're going to talk to him a little bit about the Trump announcement speech last night. We'll ask him his thoughts on that, as well as that missile that went and hit in Poland yesterday. Did you see this? Was it Russia or was it Ukraine? I'm hearing both sides of that. I'd like to hear from Judge Napolitano at 8 a.m. We'll talk to him about that one. You don't want to miss that. You can send us a text this morning at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586 if you want to have your comment read on air. Looking forward to speaking to Judge Napolitano here in just a few minutes. If this is your first time watching the Wake Up America show, then thank you very much for joining us today. We are on the air live Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. So if you want to set your calendar to come in and watch us and join us on the program, it's Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. We're grateful to have you here. And of course, every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Central Time, Judge Andrew Napolitano joins us on the program. We're talking about the pros and cons of the Donald Trump announcement. We've talked a lot about the pros already, beating Hillary Clinton, reforming taxes, deregulation, getting control of the border, significantly degrading ISIS in Syria and Iraq, normalization deals between Israel and the Gulf states. A lot of GOP, self included, appreciate his combativeness against his enemies, which have really shown how desperate and I think, pulled the curtain back on the true nature of the left. It's just unfortunate that the midterms last week, the voters didn't see it, or that there were extraneous factors which caused the voters to not give the Republicans a red wave as we had hoped. Now, I think that one of the biggest cons for Donald Trump is the hiring of Anthony Fauci, putting him in charge of the coronavirus task force. And that was one of the biggest mistakes, and not firing him sooner. Probably the biggest thing that liberty lovers, conservatives, Republicans, libertarians, we can all look at is that he did not fire Anthony Fauci when he had the opportunity to do so. So definitely put that in the bad column, on the cons column. And, I think Vance Ginn, who was his top economist, came in with a pretty big win, a pretty big pro, when Vance joined me just a few minutes ago and said that Donald Trump was open to our economic ideas. We don't realize, again, how valuable that is, to have somebody like Vance Ginn, who was working in the White House, and then to come on the show this morning to explain to us how open Donald Trump was to Austrian economic ideas, free market economic ideas, Milton Friedman's ideas. These are big deals. That is a very, very big deal for people like ourselves. That's a big pro. I think we put that in the win column for Donald Trump. Denise Welsh says that she thinks that it has been said that young voters killed the red wave. I would not be surprised, but also independent voters. And if a lot of independents are young people, you have to understand Republicans lost independents by a very large margin. And that is something that we need to consider. That could be in the Trump column as a con, losing the independents. What do you think about that one? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Carrie Lank sunk, and Herschel is going to go down faster than a $2 whore, says Scott Hughes. Good morning, Scott. Thank you for joining us on the stream this morning in the show. We're glad to have you here. Island News and Reviews is joining us and says Fauci's book by JFK is incredible. They made it into a movie that it's equal. I will have to check that out. I had no idea. Thanks for that information. We'd love to hear from you. You can also text the show at 573-319-1586 this morning. And we've got a lot of news. Boy, Donald Trump is obviously causing people to lose their this morning, and I'm here for it. You know what? At a very minimum, at least, we're going to have a lot of liberal tears, wouldn't you say? Okay, so Judge Andrew Napolitano is going to join me here in just a few minutes. We've got a commercial break before we get to the judge, and I know that some of you who are new are like, "Oh, there's so many commercials, so many commercials." Well, there's a reason for that. One, it helps me to get paid. But two, what it does is it gives me the time that I need, since I'm producing this show, to get my guest into the show, and so that everything looks good and sounds good and is nice and pretty. If I had a producer that worked for me, then I wouldn't have to worry about commercials as much. But as it is, it just buys me a little bit of time and buys me a little bit of, mortgage payments. I've got to go to
My name is Kelvin. Welcome to Frenchy Bush. This is my Didi's website. Now I've decided to speak to you with my real voice for the first time ever to tell you about how cool Frenchy Bush is. But I've decided that this is the perfect opportunity to share with you. Frenchy Bush is a good website. You should follow us on socials. If you like Frenchies or any kind of bulldogs, me and my new brother George are going to try to make your life more fun.
Hello, I'm George. My neck isn't really thick yet, but it will be. We are so glad you're here. Please ignore my floating eyeball. It helps me spot predators who might be approaching from the sides.
Didi made Frenchy bullshit to review things that he uses on me and my brother to tell you if it's good or bullshit. Take this collar, for example. Didi really likes it. Didi said it's really handy because us Frenchies got thick necks. Need something really tough. People think Frenchies are little, but if you look at us from below, you can see we are really pretty buff. Beefcake. Yes. Look at my creamy thighs and chest. Yes. You like that?
Big brother, please focus.
Frenchy Bush. Please follow us for more great content and read the Frenchy Bush blog for more fun and cool stuff.
I'm a
public defender?
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume again.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
Do you have any real-world experience?
it's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Make no mistake, reaching out is hard. Do it anyway. You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
In order to save a native fish species in Montana's Glacier National Park, Park Service officials want to use rat poison to kill off a non-native species that Park Service officials put in the lake 100 years ago. In the early 1900s, government Park Service officials artificially stocked Gunsight Lake with rainbow trout to improve recreational fishing opportunities. Since then, the rainbow trout's population has increased, and through hybridization now threatens the existence of a different species of trout native to surrounding waterways. Rat poison that government officials want to use has been banned since 2005, is toxic to animals and humans, and has been linked to Parkinson's disease. This poison is a naturally derived compound and breaks down when exposed to sunlight, and officials can use other neutralizing agents downstream to limit contamination. The National Park Service has similar plans for waterways in the Grand Canyon as well. The federal government has confirmed a nationwide shortage of Adderall, months after nearly 2/3 of community pharmacies reported that they were having trouble filling prescriptions. And despite this shortage, the federal government also indicates that it will not raise the drug's production quota for next year. In case you didn't already know, Adderall is a federally controlled substance because of its potential for abuse, and patients in most states can only pick up 1 month's supply at a time, and generally can only do so a few days before their previous prescription runs out. In response to the current shortage, the Food and Drug Administration has recommended that patients speak with their providers about finding alternative methods for treatment. The Drug Enforcement Agency, more commonly referred to as the DEA, every year sets up a production quota for Adderall to establish the quantities made for medical, scientific, and industrial use. Prescriptions for Adderall last year were up 10.4% compared to 2020. Between then and now, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, officials had relaxed federal rules that had required traditional in-person examinations before the prescription of addictive drugs like Adderall and Xanax. And in response to these rule changes, there was a boom in telehealth startup apps that were designed to streamline this relationship between remote providers and their patients. One of these popular telehealth apps, known as Cerebral Inc., is now under federal investigation for deceptive and unfair advertising and marketing practices after the Federal Trade Commission announced that it was stepping up enforcement against companies that, quote, trick or trap consumers into subscription services.
Morning, Rise and Freedom. It's 8:05. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America Show with Austin Peterson at wakeupAmericaShow.com. All right, it's everybody's favorite guest. Everybody loves to hear from my next guest. You can set your watch to every Wednesday when it's big brain time with one of the biggest brains in the liberty movement. He's a freedom fighter and he's a good friend. He's also the host of the Judging Freedom podcast on any of your mobile devices. You can read his weekly column at judgenap.com. Oh, did I give it away? That's Judge Andrew Napolitano, and he's joining us right now. Good morning, Judge. You look great. Nice to see you today.
Good morning, Austin. A pleasure to be on with you. Thank you for the flattering introduction.
Always love having you on the show, Judge, and I'm excited to get your take on this one. Obviously, the big, huge news is Donald Trump announced his candidacy for president last night, and I want to talk to you about the Russian the missile strike into Poland, which we don't know whether it was Ukraine or Russia. I'm hearing both sides of things. You also wrote an excellent column, so I'm going to try and fit it all in here today. But first, Judge, Donald Trump is a man who you have met personally, privately with many times in Trump Tower. He's a man who's asked for your advice when it comes to Supreme Court picks. With libertarians, there are many negatives, but there are also many positives. It's difficult to know whether or not Donald Trump running is a net good thing, with his views on taxes and regulations, or a bad thing, his views on trade and economics. So I guess I should ask you, Judge, as somebody who knows him better than most, what's your impression of his announcement last night?
I wish he weren't running, Austin. If he is the Republican nominee in 2024 against President Biden seeking re-election, I believe that the issue in most people's minds will be Trump, his character, his potential criminal liability, and his personality, and not what did Joe Biden do as the president of the United States in the last 4 years. I think this would be a dream for the Democrats. You know, I register as a Republican and I vote in the Republican primary often because I have friends who are running in Republican primaries in New Jersey. But I haven't voted for a Republican for president since Ronald Reagan in 1984. I voted for the Libertarian because of my view that the Republican Party is just another big government party. Trump is the opposite of a libertarian. And I say this as someone who's known him well for 35 years and whom, as you say, he called many times. He interviewed me twice for the Supreme Court of the United States and then sought my views on the others whom he eventually nominated. He's an authoritarian. I mean, that's the opposite of a libertarian. But for Republicans, this couldn't come at a worse time. It will exacerbate the divide amongst them caused by their dismal showing in the midterms. It will juice up the Democratic turnout in the runoff in Georgia between Senator Warnock and Herschel Walker, President Trump's handpicked candidate to oppose him. I think this is a narcissistic endeavor that he should have held back on for at least a year to see how events go. But he's been advised that the DOJ will have a more difficult time indicting him if he's running against the incumbent president of the United States. I think that view is hogwash, but I know lawyers that are advancing that argument to him. And he likes to be the center of attention, which what he did last night will help him to do.
If you're just tuning in, I'm speaking to Judge Andrew Napolitano, who is definitely not holding back this morning on Donald Trump. Now, if I could push back with you on just a moment, Judge, and, the views of him as an authoritarian, from a rhetoric perspective, I think that, you can't be argued with there. But I could argue with you when it comes to the question of him being an authoritarian and in nominating the most libertarian Supreme Court justice, perhaps in history, Neil Gorsuch. Donald Trump reformed taxes even more than Ronald Reagan did. He pushed for regulation. He pushed for normalization deals between Israel and the Gulf states. He beat Hillary Clinton, and he also, to his credit, Judge, was he passed the First Step Act, which was a major criminal justice reform push that I think a lot of libertarians agree with. So, I mean, do all of those things? Do you dismiss those things when in your analysis of him?
No, no, I don't dismiss those things, except for taxes, because where I live, taxes went up because we have the highest real estate and state income taxes in the union, and they're no longer deductible against your adjusted gross income for federal purposes. But that's just unique to New York, New Jersey, and California. It's the price I pay for living in this People's Republic of New Jersey. Everything you
on the First Step Act, though, I mean that in itself is huge. Right to try, another example.
He and I talked about this at great length. It was a terrific thing to do. This resulted in letting people out of jail who shouldn't have been in jail in the first place. This is a reversal of a portion of the drug laws that were enacted by a Republican Congress and President Bill Clinton, which imposed lengthy jail sentences for simple possession of marijuana, which is now legal in 2/3 of the country. Yes, he does have a libertarian streak in him. He's in favor of a gay marriage because, as he said to me, it's none of the government's blankety blank. I won't use the actual word he used on your show, business, who you get married to. And of course, he's right. It is none of the government's business. So in some areas, yes, there were libertarian instincts. Did he understand government? No. Is he conversant with the Constitution? Absolutely not. Can he use the Justice Department as a plaything to torment his adversaries? Well, a lot of presidents have done that. He attempted to do it as well. But did government grow under Donald Trump? Yes, it did. Did he borrow money? How about $1 trillion in 4 years with no war? So the path of government growing and in our face and in our lives not only didn't stop, not only didn't go backwards, it continued to go forward.
Well, as Jefferson said, it is the tendency of government to grow and for liberty to shrink. It would probably take more than just one man in that position of power to shrink the size of government. We would also need a Congress that agreed with us as well. If you're just tuning in,
it would take a Congress of Austin Petersons and Thomas Massey's and Ron Paul in the White House and 5 Neil Gorsuch's on the Supreme Court to shrink the government back to the confines of the Constitution.
If you just are tuning in, we're speaking to Judge Andrew Napolitano. He is the host of the Judging Freedom podcast, which you can find right here on YouTube and on download on any of your mobile devices, and read his weekly column at judgenap.com. Now, I think another point in the pro column, too, Judge, was his hesitancy to get involved in wars. Donald Trump was someone who was very much against getting involved in foreign conflicts, despite the fact that he did keep the drone program alive and did continue to engage in many of the conflicts that we were already embroiled in. However, from a rhetorical perspective, I think you and I appreciated that at a minimum that he was saying that it's not the role of the United States to be the policeman of the world. Now, I would like to see more of that. And quite frankly, I agreed with what he said last night, that possibly Russia might not have invaded Ukraine because they would have been more afraid of Donald Trump than they are of the senile, demented old man in the White House right now. But that leads us to our
the senile, demented old man in the White House is not running foreign and military policy. It's being run by the globalists in the State Department and in the Pentagon. What is he suggesting? That he would have introduced American firepower military to resist the Russians? Well, then we would have had World War III. I'll tell you where his instinct was good on this. And that's where he suggested that we should withdraw from the NATO treaty. Now, if we were not in NATO, we would not be concerned about an errant Russian missile landing in a Polish village yesterday and killing 2 Poles, because something like that would not have potentially triggered our legal obligation to get involved in a war against Russia. So his instinct in that respect was very good. Of course, he didn't have the support in the Congress to do that. The president can't withdraw us from a treaty. The Senate can de-ratify a treaty, takes 2/3 of the Senate. That's where Republicans and Democrats, Lindsey Graham and just pick any liberal, a Democrat, agree on, the need to draw Russian blood. Trump was decidedly anti-war in that respect.
Judge, now when it comes to the question of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, I believe Trump's argument was that he would have been able to get a deal done that would have prevented that conflict, or perhaps that Russia would have been so afraid of Donald Trump. And having lived through the Nixon era, must remember the foreign policy of the crazy bastard strategy. It is quite possible that Donald Trump is, crazy like a fox, pretending to be absolutely insane, that will do anything, which is, in my mind, and you and I have discussed this before, saber rattling does not violate the non-aggression principle. Puffing yourself up like a blowfish and making yourself look more dangerous than you really are is a legitimate strategy in terms of foreign policy in order to protect yourself from what someone else might do. Looking bigger, rattling your sabers, but not necessarily intervening or initiating conflict, which is, our mantra. So I believe that's probably that is a possibility that might be what Trump was discussing last night, but that's not the reality of where we live today. We now live in a situation where our enemies do not fear us around the world. Russia does not respect us. China acts with impunity. Iran acts with impunity, and these are countries that do not have our best interests in heart, and ones that we have to keep an eye on. So my question to you
To
is,
which I say, who cares? They're not threats to our national security. They don't take my property or my freedom. Who cares what goes on in Iran? Who cares what the Chinese do? As long as they trade with us, that's all I'm concerned about.
well, can
The
I push
fact
back?
that the
Can I
United
push?
States has,
Wait, but let me push back on you here for just a moment, Judge. Put on my George W. Bush hat. China
oh,
actually.
please don't even wear such a hat.
But this makes it more interesting, Judge, makes it more fun. China actively engages in subterfuge and uses its technology to undermine infrastructure here in the United States. Like China constantly wages cyber warfare against civilian targets here in the United States. It's a known
Yeah, so what
secret.
are we supposed to do? Bomb Beijing because of that?
Well, what I guess I should ask you, Judge. I'm interviewing you, so I'm asking the questions here, Judge. So, what should we do to that? I mean, if China is, that arguably is a violation of the non-aggression principle. Chinese foreign rogue agents are using computers to break computers here in the United States that are charged with the infrastructure that when you drive into Manhattan, those computers are responsible with directing, traffic across the bridge and for your safety when you cross into Manhattan. A foreign government is, in essence, committing acts of war on a daily basis. What should we do to that, Judge? How should we respond to something like that?
Well, we shouldn't be killing people. I guess the response needs to be proportionate. Under Aquinas's rules of war, the response has to be proportionate. They haven't killed a single American, as far as I know, with this. So if the foreign policy of the Chinese is to inveigle their way into our computer systems, we have to hire some smart geeks to find a way to resist that. But to suggest that China is a threat to our national security, Iran is a threat to our national security, Russia is a threat to our national security, it's hogwash.
I think I would disagree.
That's the Woodrow Wilson argument from World War I, because I don't like them or because they're harming a friend, they're therefore an enemy of ours.
Well, I think I would disagree with you that they're not a threat. I do believe that they are a threat. I think that China probably deliberately unleashed this COVID-19 pandemic on the world through that lab. It probably wasn't an accident. And if we did find out that that was the case, that would be certainly a violation of the non-aggression principle. And that would mean that China did deliberately kill Americans. but that's an argument we can have for another day. I simply don't agree with the neoconservatives that it's our job to police the world or that we should get into wars of intervention. But I think we need a strong national defense to prevent the kinds of threats that these countries do pose to us. I'd like to move on, Judge, to your column. At judgenap.com, you can read on a weekly basis. This one was really good, where you were talking about a program that went on during the Trump administration that involved national security as well as our Fourth Amendment rights. Do you want to explain to our listeners what your column's about this week?
Yeah, the FBI, thank you, Weston. The FBI during the Trump administration, and I can't imagine the president knew about this. This is a problem with a rogue FBI. In fact, I doubt that Jim Comey even knew about this. Spent $5 million to buy Israeli software known as ZeroClick. ZeroClick is a software that enables the user of the software to download the contents of a target's desktop or a mobile device without tricking the target into clicking on it. So when the FBI bought this, they brought it to New Jersey of all places, and they experimented with it. So they probably have, I'm holding up my mobile phone, they probably have the contents of this. If they were right here in New Jersey, it enabled them to download without a search warrant and without notice to the target / victim everything that's in the victim's mobile or desktop device. When Congress got wind of these experiments, they brought Chris Wray, the director of the FBI, for them, who said, oh, no, we just bought this so we can understand how it works. Hogwash. They bought it so that they could use it, but that's what he said. Congress accepted that when Biden became president and learned about it. To his credit, he said, you're not going to use it. Park it somewhere. And they supposedly didn't use it. They dragged Chris Wray before them again because of these experiments going on. And he gave sort of another nonsense, gibberish argument, the essence of which was, we haven't really used it. We just need to know what's out there. Well, reporters filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the FBI, which, to their credit, they complied with. And the compliance produced documents in court revealing to judges and revealing to criminal defense lawyers that this software had been used in an experimental basis. No judge would allow evidence from this to be introduced in court. These documents that were released from the Freedom of Information Act show that the director of the FBI materially misled Congress under oath, a felony, and that FBI agents themselves conspired to engage in computer hacking, a felony, and yet they're still out there. The FBI is extremely dangerous to personal liberty. It has become a domestic surveillance entity that is not concentrating on fighting crime, but anticipating crime by its algorithms that it uses in surveillance. This Israeli software, in my opinion, is just the tip of the iceberg that the FBI got caught with. Kudos to Senator Wyden, who's a lefty from the left coast, but who leads the Senate in defense of civil liberties, and without whose anger and frustration at Chris Wray's testimony and letters to Wray, which he published, we wouldn't even know that this is going on. Now we know about it. Now we know they have it. It's still in the warehouse in New Jersey. We don't know if they're still using it or when the last time they used it was, but we know it is more likely than not that the FBI and their director committed crimes and they should be prosecuted. The FBI should be defunded and it should be disbanded. It is nowhere countenanced in the Constitution.
Amen.
I know.
Amen.
I'm not holding back, but you bring me on your show so that I won't hold back.
Hell yeah, that's right. That's why we bring the judge on. Al Johnson over in the live stream says, love Judge Knapp. We absolutely agree. Judge Andrew Napolitano, I'm going to take off my George W. Bush hat and put on my Judge Knapp hat. But I have one last question before I let you go. Judge, why don't you run for president?
What, have you been talking to Gerald Celente lately?
Judge Andrew Napolitano, host of the Judging Freedom podcast, our good friend. We'll see you next week at the exact same time. And we'll hear from you again later today in St. Louis on the Austin Peterson Show. Thank you for your time, Judge.
And on Judging Freedom today At 3 o'clock Eastern, Colonel Doug McGregor on How Close Are We to World War III?
I'll share that stream with everybody so they can watch you and Doug McGregor this afternoon at 3 p.m. You don't want to miss it. The Austin Peterson Show at 2, Judging Freedom at 3, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you,
Boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here. And we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Austin's wife. I want to thank you all for watching the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. This show has been a huge venture for our family, so we would love it if you could join us.
I believe in liberty, and I believe in Austin's ability to spread the ideas of liberty. Do you?
I want to ask you today to join Peterson's Patriots with a pledge of $17.76 a month. Help us to stay cancel-proof so we can spread the message of limited government across the country. I joined Peterson's Patriots myself, just in a little different way. Visit wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and make your pledge today.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion, delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table, or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
Speaker Pelosi's husband, Paul, made a big investment in chips just before Congress votes on a bill that would give $52 billion in subsidies and tax credits
Good morning. How are you doing there? It's 8:30. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. I hope that bad word didn't get it in there. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Send us a text, 573-319-1586. Thanks so much for all the nice comments this morning over on the live stream. I see all the great interview comments. Sarah Palacios, Al Johnson, Andy Opperman, Elizabeth Press. I appreciate that. It makes me feel good. It's been a beautiful morning so far. Donald Trump. Long-anticipated launch of his 2024 campaign set off pretty strong reactions on Tuesday. Conservatives, liberals, libertarians, some of them expressing joy, some of them expressing dismay. If a liberal is expressing joy about Donald Trump running for president of the United States, I think you know why. And I'm seeing it over on Twitter. Liberals are now trending MAGAGA, MAGA, because it makes you gag, they say.
No, God! No, God!
Oh,
please,
God.
No!
People on Twitter right now saying,
We are led by very, very stupid people. Very, very stupid people.
yes. Some people,
We
though,
cannot.
some people last night after they listened to Trump's speech were like, and,
From now on, it's going to be America first, okay? America first.
Donald Trump failed America, said President Biden last night during Donald Trump's presidential address. 76-year-old Donald Trump versus 79-year-old President Biden. It's going to be the battle of depends. The president himself was speaking last night. He was attending a mangrove tree planting ceremony at the G20 summit in Bali. The National Review came out this morning, which they opposed Trump during the 2016 primary, and they posted an editorial headline that just said no. And they posted a quote by Voltaire that says, to paraphrase Voltaire after he attended an orgy, once was an experiment, twice would be perverse. They went on to describe the former president as, quote, bruised by recent election defeats. And they said, this is the National Review speaking, by the way, they called him monumentally selfish and morally and electorally compromised. Trump's announcement tonight is just the kickoff of what will be a messy Republican primary, with candidates competing to be the most extreme MAGA Republican in the race. The DNC will be ready for them all. This is according to Jamie Harrison, who is the Democratic National Committee chairman. Yikes. David Axelrod, he is the director of the University of Chicago School of Institute of Politics, and he was Barack Obama's campaign manager, called the speech low energy last night. Like he's going through the motions. The only enthusiasm he's shown is for nasty asides about Biden's acuity, David Axelrod said. Axelrod also said that he also observed what he thought was a jab at Ron DeSantis, but he says not a task for a conventional politician. This is a task for a movement. Talking about you, DeSantis, Axelrod said. And low energy, this comment was actually echoed by Jeb Bush. Jeb Jr. tweeted, adding that the hashtags weak and sleepy Donnie. Wow, what a low energy speech by the Donald former. Let's see. I think that is actually. Oh, you know what? The New York Post posted this. Let's see. Hold on. Jeb Bush Jr. The problem with Twitter nowadays is that you don't know. This is Jeb Bush Jr. So this is Jeb Bush's kid. Let's see. It's verified, but it's not one of those fake blue check marks like all the plebes have been posting. The check marks where it's like you don't know if somebody's actually who they are anymore on Twitter, because those blue check marks, you have to actually click on the blue check mark to see if they're the person they say that they were. Well, a brand new texter this morning just texted in from the 810, said, Mr. Advanced Placement for Liberty Trump, for all his mistakes, was still the best president in decades. That's how bad it is here. Very funny. Yes, that's a good one. Very funny. Where is the 810 area code that we're getting that text message from this morning? That's our friend in East Central Michigan. Good morning, East Central Michigan. Thank you so much for joining us on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. We're talking this morning about the pros and trumps of pros and trumps. We don't want to call a con a Trump. The pros and cons of Donald Trump's announcement last night. Earlier in the program, I listed off things like, beating Hillary Clinton, great. Named 3 constitutionalist judges, great. Reformed taxes, even better. Pushed for deregulation, even better. Pushed for control of the border, a good thing. Border wall, in my mind, I think that's a con. I think that's a big, giant, huge waste of taxpayer dollars, and it won't work. But for those of you who are in the pro territory, I just want to take a quick second, brief second, to offer you a little bit of commercial. Remember that the holidays are coming, and for people who are wanting to get their holiday shopping in early, don't forget the AP for Liberty shop has got all of your Liberty Buddhas, space Buddhas, covered. So we've got a Donald Trump Buddha in the shop. You can check it out right there. Little Donald Trump Buddha. Actually, let me pull this up over here on this camera so you can see. Now, this is a golden Trump Buddha. This is more of I have 2 different types of Donald Trump Buddhas, and this is the premium Trump Buddha, and this one is made out of a silk. I 3D print these at home. You can see, look at the detail on that sucker right there. Donald Trump Buddha. Right there, you can see. And I made that myself in my 3D printer at my house. The based Buddha, this is the silk premium version. We also have like a gold version that's painted gold that's a little bit less pricey, but because this takes a little bit more expensive material and it's a little bit more difficult to print. This one is a little bit more of a premium. And just so you know, if you do want to get one of your Donald Trump Buddhas, you've got a coupon code right over here. Yeah, over there for 10% off this week only. You can use the code Cantina to get 10% off of your AP for Liberty shop purchase. So if you want to get a Donald Trump Buddha, even if you're not a Donald Trump fan, but you've got somebody in your family, you want to give them an awesome Buddha. It also makes a good Thanksgiving gift. I can try and get you one in time for Thanksgiving. So head over to the AP for Liberty shop and use the code Cantina to get your Donald Trump Buddha. All right, let's go. Moving on. So good things, right? We went through those, finished with like how he handled ISIS and in Syria and in Iraq. Those were good things. And on the negative side, hired Anthony Fauci, didn't fire Anthony Fauci, pushed a vaccine I think that many of his supporters didn't agree with, although that's not how I feel, but I know that is definitely a con in the Trump camp for those who think that, the vaccine is causing myocarditis in people who are, perfectly healthy, which, I think is up in the air. It's a possibility, but, people are starting to acknowledge it. NBC News, I believe, acknowledged that yesterday. And when I spoke to Senator and Dr. Bob Onder here in the state of Missouri about that, he says that he thinks that, the vaccine is really for people who are only in an advanced possible risk from COVID-19, and that people who are young and healthy should not take that risk. But to me, the question about the vaccine is one of trade-offs. And I know that people don't want to hear this, but I'm going to try and change your mind on this a little bit. And the Liz Fanning Press contacted me yesterday and said, when you say something to your followers that you think is going to be unpopular, like what I'm about to say, I should ask you to be open to possibly changing your mind. So that's what I'm going to ask you right now when I explain this. And I think Thomas Sowell explained it best. I've probably used this example before, but Thomas Sowell was being interviewed by Roger Ailes about the polio vaccine, and he was asked about the downsides to the polio vaccine, which there were some, right? The polio vaccine, some people did have a negative reaction to it. I wish I could, I see the interview right here. I wish I could pull it up, but I'll try and pull it up during the commercial break and find this part for you where Thomas Sowell talks about the polio vaccine and the trade-offs, because Sowell is essentially arguing that there are no such things as solutions to our problems, only trade-offs. And people who are believers in big government are always telling us that, trade-offs, that they have solutions, but there are no solutions, only trade-offs. So it's the same thing, I think, with the COVID-19 vaccine. It's not a solution to COVID-19. It's a trade-off. right? If you're in it at an advanced age, or you have asthma, or you have with the possibility that you could have an adverse reaction to COVID-19 that's more severe than others in the population, then, as Dr. Onder has said on my show, then it might make sense for you to get the COVID-19 vaccine, knowing that there still is a potential chance of myocarditis or some other side effect, because it's a trade-off. The danger of COVID-19 is greater than the possibility of myocarditis, right? That's the trade-off, right? And I'll grab this clip during the break, and I see it here with Thomas Sowell and Roger Ailes, which, if you know who Thomas Sowell is, but you might not know who Roger Ailes is. Roger Ailes, definitely a polarizing character. He used to be the president of Fox News. He helped found Fox News. He was an advisor for Richard Nixon, and somebody that I really look up to, a titan of the television industry, and somebody that he hired Judge Andrew Napolitano there at Fox. And I think, Roger Ailes was very much a genius, although he was demonized and driven out of his job there at Fox News in disgrace because of sexual assault allegations. But again, it's kind of like Thomas Jefferson and slavery. Some people do great things and they also do great evils. So it's a good question of what you think. John Ettinger, he's the one who messaged me just outside of Flint. We've had over 50 years of a killdeer in Congress. It's worse here in Gretchland, that's a reference to his governor, than elsewhere. Believe you me, liberty has two roots: a united, large effort over many states at once, or two, infinite local movements making changes from the grounds up. What do we do? Wow, that's a big question, John, and I don't really know the answer to that. Another listener texted in and said the polio vaccine was not a genetic code destabilizing shot like the COVID shots. Bad analogy. I think it's a good analogy. You're definitely wrong. It's a great analogy because it's still, even if it is a genetic code destabilizing shot, it's better to have your genetic code destabilized when you're 70 years old and not die from COVID, because you won't die from COVID-19 in 2 weeks. You might die from genetic destabilization in 10 or 15 years, but that's probably when you're going to die anyway. So it's a great analogy, not a bad analogy. And they also said, how dare you defile the greatness of Buddha with Trump? As a lover of Buddhism, I am offended, but unattached. All right.
My name is Kelvin. Welcome to Frenchy Bush. This is my Didi's website. Now I've decided to speak to you with my real voice for the first time ever to tell you about how cool Frenchy Bush is. But I've decided that this is the perfect opportunity to share with you. Frenchy Bush is a good website. You should follow us on socials. If you like Frenchies or any kind of bulldogs, me and my new brother George are going to try to make your life more fun.
Hello, I'm George. My neck isn't really thick yet, but it will be. We are so glad you're here. Please ignore my floating eyeball. It helps me spot predators who might be approaching from the sides.
Didi made Frenchy bullshit to review things that he uses on me and my brother to tell you if it's good or bullshit. Take this collar, for example. Didi really likes it. Didi said it's really handy because us Frenchies got thick necks. Need something really tough. People think Frenchies are little, but if you look at us from below, you can see we are really pretty buff. Beefcake, yes. Look at my creamy thighs and chest. Yes, you like that?
Big brother, please focus.
Frenchy Bush. Please follow us for more great content and read the Frenchy Bush blog for more fun and cool stuff.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume again.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
A real-world experience.
it's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Make no mistake, reaching out is hard. Do it anyway.
I need help.
You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. It's 8:47. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America Show at wakeupamericashow.com. You can send us a text at 573-319-1586. We'd love to hear from you. A listener texted in saying that they're not wrong about the COVID vaccine. They'd rather die from COVID than be a mutant. These people are dying within a year or two. Well, I guess, let's see, it's been about 2 years since I've had mine. I'm still alive, baby. And I'm back and I'm badder than ever. It's the Austin Peterson Show. Don't forget, at 2 p.m. every day, I've got my radio program in St. Louis on the Real Talk Radio Network. You don't want to miss that show because that is where I go and I preach to the unconverted. That's a very Trump-heavy network, and they've got a libertarian like me out there. And this is what I heard yesterday from the owners of the station. Every time I'm on in the afternoons at 2 p.m., their phones blow up. And yeah, that's a good thing, ultimately, but it's not all good comments. There's a lot of negative in there. He's a never-Trumper. There's a lot of positive comments as well. So why don't you listen in at 2 p.m. and join us on the app and send in some positive comments to help outweigh the negative comments over on the Real Talk Radio Network. You know, I can't be anything else but me. I've got to be me. I've got to be straight AP, and that's what it is. We've been talking today about the pros and cons of Donald Trump, and you know what? I'm going to talk about that again today on the radio show later today at 2 p.m. because I think that it's important. If I wanted to be the most popular guy on the network, what would I do? I would just, you know what I should do? I should just copy Sean Hannity's show or Dan Bongino's show, right? What do you think? Is that what I should do? Just be just like Dan Bongino or Tucker Carlson. How about that? Should I be exactly like Tucker Carlson? I'll be a huge star. Huge, famous star. Be on all the news channels all the time, burning up the headlines. But it wouldn't be me, would it? It wouldn't really be AP. And you know what? I'm maybe confined to certain segments in terms of popularity. But I sleep well at night. I'm a happy man. I love my life. I love my wife. I love my friends, and I love my family. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, how much more happiness could you have? I mean, I've got freedom. I've got my friends. I've got pretty much everything anybody could want for the most part. But yeah, you know, more money would always be great. One of our listeners are texting in and said, or Island News and Politics, or excuse me, Island News and Reviews this morning. It's the first time we've seen you on the live stream. Introduce yourself. We'd love to learn more about you. Whenever we have new friends that join us on the show, I always like to say, hey, who are you? Tell us about yourself. Doug H. says, that audience is very different from this one. Yes, it is. Very, very strange. Austin, you better not read that on air, where she's talking about her eyeball does not float. No idea what you're talking about there. Was John McCain a rhino, says Al Johnson. It's a tough question. I don't know. We'll have to hear from you on that one. Again, you can text this show 573-319-1586. A friend from the 215 area code said, haha, love you, bro. Love you too. We can disagree and still be friends. I think that's the way it ought to be. So maybe you can just turn off that damn music, Austin. It's so freaking loud. Send us a text 573-319-1586 where we're talking about the pros and cons of President Trump. We've gone through a lot of the pros: taxes, ISIS in Syria and Iraq, handled them, deregulation, got control of the border. You dork, dog commercial, floating eyeball. Oh, okay, yes, your floating eyeball. But on the con sides, I think mostly it's related to the coronavirus pandemic, how Donald Trump handled it. Criticizing Sweden for not locking down their country, that's in the con side of things. Trump, I think, has a limited understanding of our constitutional system and a little respect for our constitutional system. I think his conduct is unbecoming of a president of the United States. For that, I would say, look more to Ronald Reagan or Ron DeSantis. What is it with the Rons? Ron Paul, Ronald Reagan, Ron DeSantis. There's a lot of good Rons in politics. Rons and then, by extension, Rands. The midterms last week, how Trump candidates performed last week in the midterms. I put that in the con column. After Trump secured the GOP nomination in 2016, he didn't exceed 47% in either of his campaigns. In 2016, he won 46.1%, and then in 2020, he lost with 46.8%. So a lot of people came out to vote against Donald Trump. In Island News and Elections is introducing himself on the live stream. He says, I started following AP after his JRE, and I voted for the pothead who taught me about Aleppo, Gary Johnson. Very funny, very funny. Thank you for that. Nerd Bands for Liberty. Isn't Reagan slightly overrated as a conservative? Perhaps, yeah, I would say so. But I think one of the things I think libertarians, if you're, and I know that this is blasphemy, but if you're so overly policy focused, you miss the forest for the trees sometimes. I think moral leadership is a real thing. And I think Ronald Reagan was a good moral leader of the United States. I think Ronald Reagan was someone that people respected and made people proud to be Americans. The problem is that Ronald Reagan versus Donald Trump. Remember, Ronald Reagan had a sweeping landslide in his second election. There was a good reason for that. Donald Trump did not win his second election. I know that there are people who are listening who are like, but it was stolen. I don't believe that. It's okay if you do. I'm on the record for saying I don't think that that is the case. Do I think that there were cases of fraud in certain areas? Yes. Do I think that they impacted the outcome of the election? No. I think that Donald Trump lost the election in 2020. That makes me, no end of enemies in the Republican Party, of which I'm a member, but I don't care. You can hear all of the other conservatives on all of the other conservative stations telling you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I believe is the truth. So with Donald Trump, I think that electorally in 2024, it's probably a tall order to get him across the finish line. Probably a tall order. If he wins the Republican nomination, would I vote for him? Yes. Would I prefer someone like Ron DeSantis? Yes. And
like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today. Fire.
Your printing company stinks. They charge you too much money and they don't love America enough. We've got the solution. Patriot Printing USA. Whether you're running for office, saving souls, or just need business cards that will get you the new job you've been looking for, Patriot Printing USA has got you covered with the best prices around. Palm cards, brochures, bumper stickers, door hangers, you name it, we've got it. PatriotPrintingUSA.com. That's PatriotPrintingUSA.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.